Привіт! I'm Chuck Olinik, a Ukrainian-American. I was baptized with the name Yaroslav. That's also the name I use in the historical reenactment group, the Society for Creative Anachronism, where I'm known as Yaroslav the Persistent. Most people call me Yari. In my videos of Slavic mythology and folklore and culture and history that I post to my channel, which by the way would be really cool if you subscribe to, I've mostly concentrated on Kiev as the center of the Rus lands. But that focus is going to shift. The center is not going to be able to hold, and now we're going to start looking to the north. In that last history video I did, number 87, if you're counting, the attention was on the Principality of Vladimir Suzdal, and in 91 of Tales of the Borderlands, about a year ago, the early days of Novgorod, or Novgorod, depending on how you want to pronounce it. But now we're going to get to the good stuff. Novgorod as a republic. The Novgorod Republic was a state that existed from the 12th to the 15th centuries in northern Russia, stretching from the Gulf of Finland in the west to the northern Ural Mountains in the east. Its capital was the city of Novgorod. So during the era of Kievan Rus, Novgorod was a trade hub. It was at the northern end of both the Volga trade route and the route of the Varangians to the Greeks along the Dnipro River system. There were a lot of goods, a vast array of goods that were transported along these routes and exchanged with local Novgorod merchants and other traders. And it's that huge amount of trade that's going on that's going to probably make Novgorod a bit different from other cities. The Republic prospered as the easternmost trading post of the Hanseatic League, and its people were much influenced by the culture of the Byzantines. A lot of this history shows up in the chronicles, not just in the primary chronicle, but Novgorod had its own homegrown one, and the chronicles stated that the Novgorodians paid tribute to the Prince of Kiev, who assigned princes to rule in the city of Novgorod. But by 1113, the Novgorodians started to reject being politically dependent upon Kiev. The Republic also happened to expand, and that was going like east and northeast through the 12th century, and they were coming into contact with lands that were like north of the city that were rich with fur and sea fauna and salt, and the good economic base there. Here's where they start getting a bit more independent. In 1136, the Novgorodians dismissed Prince Vsevolod Mstislavich, and over the next century and a half were able to invite in and dismiss a number of princes. However, these invitations or dismissals often were based upon who was the dominant prince in Rus at the time, and not on any independent thinking on the part of Novgorod. So that position of prince in Novgorod wasn't an inheritable position, and the power of the prince was much reduced. When, at least some of them, when they came in, they had to sign a ariad, a contract, and that protected the interests of the Novgorodian boyars, and it laid out the prince's rights and the prince's responsibility. He's still an important figure, though. First and foremost, amongst the prince's functions, he was a military leader. And similar to other medieval states in Rus, the prince had his druzhina, or his retinue, and would call upon the retinues of the archbishop and the prominent boyars, as well as the garrisons of fortresses. There was also the levy. While potentially all free Novgorodians could be mobilized, in reality, the number of recruits depended upon the level of danger faced by Novgorod. The prince was also a patron of the churches in the city, and he held court. Hey, that's what a prince does. Although If he wasn't personally in the city, then he had a lieutenant called a namestnik who presided over the court. So where did the princes live? Well, one of the residences was on the marketplace called Yaroslav's Court, after Prince Yaroslav the Wise, and another, Ryukovo Horodishi, that was several miles south of the market side of the city. By the way, those residences, the prince doesn't own them. He just lives in them. He was forbidden, at least through like several riads, that, those contracts, that he couldn't own land in Novgorod and he couldn't collect taxes himself from Novgorod lands. He lived off the money that was given to him by the city. Now, getting into one of his limitations on his power. There was a posadnik, basically a burgermeister, mayor. It was an elected position, and usually from the boyars. And the posadnik always had to be present in the court, and no court decision could be made without his approval. And that kind of sounds like a Roman tribune who could say veto, all right? A little more of a comparison with that is, in time, the number of posadnike increased, just like the number of tribunes in the Roman Republic. Yeah. Also, without the posadnik's approval, the prince could neither give out Novgorod lands nor issue laws. And he also could not extradite or prosecute a Novgorodian outside of Novgorodian land. So the prince isn't all powerful. I'm pretty sure the social structure in Novgorod would be similar to that of Kiev. At least nominal executives of Novgorod, they were going to be the princes, invited in from the neighboring states, even though their power waned in the 13th and early 14th centuries. And church officials were part of the upper crust, just as the boyars were. After all, archbishops were probably the richest single landowners in Novgorod, and they also made money off of court fees used for the use of weights and measures in the marketplace. And remember how busy Novgorod was as far as being a hub of commerce and of trade, and through other means. Some scholars argue that the archbishop was the actual head of the executive branch of the government, or maybe that there was a council of lords that was headed by the archbishop and met at the archiepiscopal palace. But in any case, he remained an important town official. In addition to overseeing the church in Novgorod, he headed embassies, oversaw certain court cases of a secular nature, and carried out other secular tasks. However, the archbishops appear to have worked with the boyars to reach a consensus and almost never acted alone. Novgorod was way ahead of its time as far as governance. It developed procedures that had a large measure of democratic participation, and it shared similarities with the democratic traditions of, some Scandinavian peasant republics. The people had the power to elect city officials. Hey, remember, they could fire a prince. There are descriptions of a veche, or a town meeting, where these decisions would have been made, which included people from all social classes, ranging from the posadnike, remember, the guys that act like tribunes and have veto power, to the черные люди, literally the black folks, or the lowest free class. Yeah, we don't have all the details of the precise constitution of the Novgorod Republic. There is a lot of traditional histories, and you have this image of a very institutionalized network of veches, those public assemblies, and a government of posadnik and Desiatsky, 1,000 men. Originally, those would be like the head of the town militia. Later, that's like a judicial and a commercial official. And there's other members of aristocratic families, right? The boyars and the archbishops. And then you can get into like what the Soviet scholars wanted to imply of, look at everything as being ruled by the people. So remember, you're going to take a look at history through a particular lens, and you can see your own biases. Also, history is written by the winners. So when you had people that were doing the whole Soviet thing, what else are they going to do? Of course they're going to say, hey, look, see, we had it way back then. It is the right way to do things. Traditional scholarship argues that in handling the political affairs of Novgorod the Great, it's called Novgorod the Great sometimes, that the tradesmen or tradespeople and craftsmen were organized into 5 kontsi, or I recognize the word as kinsa, ends in Russian, basically neighborhoods that they lived in. Each end was then organized by the streets in which they lived. The ends in the streets often bore names indicating that certain trades were concentrated in certain parts of the city. There was a carpenter's end, there was a potter's end. Merchants were organized into associations, of which the most famous were those of wax traders called Ivan's 100, and of the merchants engaged in overseas trade. But just because there certain neighborhoods and streets and ends had the names of certain trades, don't assume that they were automatically like guilds and unions. These could have been like neighborhood administrative groups, and street organizations would do things like they would build churches. If plague broke out, they usually took care of burying the dead who were piling up in their neighborhoods. Beyond that, the activities aren't really so certain. Okay, so how do you deal with running a republic where you have a lot of democratic participation? Probably have to have a literate society, and Novgorod was really well known for that, because you don't just have the Novgorod First Chronicle, you also have travel diaries that were written. There are legends about local posadnik. There are Belini, the heroic tales about bogatiri, who are heroes, who are like merchants, like Sadko. So I'm just trying to set you up for what's coming next, because what's coming next is I'm going to have to start looking at the Mongols coming in and how that's going to disrupt life in Eastern Europe. So until the next time, do побачення.